So,
Okay.
Matt, run the numbers for Nick Lowe.
Okay, so Nick Lowe's Labor of Lust comes in at 1,276 in the 1970s. Number 125 in 1979. Number 7,922 of all time. It is Nick Lowe's second highest rated album on Best Ever Albums, behind 1978's Jesus of Cool. And this did not make Rolling Stone's list. So, John, is this a album I need to listen to before I die, I assume?
No, this is a John selection.
Oh. So
Jesus, you didn't pick Jesus of Cool? What a title.
I won't go too far into it, but I picked, and because I'll share later, I picked this album because I wanted to cover the album that Cruel to Be Kind was on, and I wanted to know which album it was, and I picked this. So that was how this ended up on here.
Nice.
And also, Nick Lowe does have a pretty good rep amongst musicians, and so when I was looking for some episodes to get to the 6, artists to fill in the 6, I saw his name and I said, I'd like to cover an album. So I dug it out. So there's a little bit of the insight. You know what, though, Matt? Why don't you just go ahead right into the takes?
All right. So I knew Cruel to Be Kind very well. It's one of those songs that I've always known. I never knew who sang it, and now I do. Didn't know any of the other songs in this album. And my main takeaway here from this record is I think Nick Lowe could have been the 6th traveling Wilbury. Because I'm just hearing, I got a lot of, I think Cruel to Be Kind always sounded like a George Harrison type song to me. There's a lot of songs on here that sound kind of like Tom Petty. I don't think we were kind of talking last week about, artists that we're listening to around this time that that you can tell, like, holy cow, this are really kind of breaking new ground, versus other ones like John, you were saying, like The Cars kind of stood out to you as being an album that kind of was noticeable for not breaking that ground or picking up where other people left off. And this album kind of is not reinventing anything like that. This is kind of straight up rock, blues, pop, some country stuff. There's some country things towards the end of the record that were kind of interesting. I'm hearing a lot of, callbacks to bands like the Byrds, and some of those, and like George Harrison, kind of stuff like that. So I like this. This is the type of thing that's kind of up my alley, so to speak, because I do like a lot of those things. I wasn't blown away. I think that there's certainly the formula here for me. I think I kind of just viewed it as like a little bit more of a second tier of some of those bands. That I think that they had some good stuff going on, but it wasn't like, holy crap, I love this, But I think that Cruel to Be Kind is a great single. And songs like, he's got some Bo Diddley beat stuff in here with, like, what is it, Big Kick, Plain Scrap, and maybe it's You Make Me. I think it's got that Bo Diddley beat going on. I like the mixing of the country, Without Love, and what is it, Endless Gray Ribbons, kind of like this slow waltz kind of a thing. So those are kind of some more country records. And not that whole lot. I think Born Fighter might have been my least favorite. Just wasn't a huge fan of that chorus.
I thought that was catchy.
Really? It was okay. I don't know. Maybe the something about the chorus just kind of annoyed me. But overall, I liked this. I didn't love it. It was a nice little find to for certain sounds that I tend to gravitate towards. But again, I think that there's other acts that I like more than this. But as far as like just being something that I wasn't really familiar with or aware that was out, this was a nice find. So I'm a thumbs up on this.
I enjoyed this album. I only knew Cruel to Be Kind also, and this album to me seems like an intentional throwback to 60s music, almost like we've reached the point in the decade where artists are starting to have nostalgia for the 60s, maybe the music they listened to when they grew up or something. And it definitely sounds like a singer-songwriter having fun with kind of the genres, dabbling, like Matt said, in different things. And the lyrics are kind of the best part of some of these songs. They're very suggestive at times. There's a lot of double meanings and double entendres that I noticed. And he seems to be having a lot of fun with playing with these tropes and making things, ultimately about sex in most of these songs.
It was a theme.
Yeah. So I enjoyed it. I thought the lyrics were catchy. For the most part, he seemed to switch up his voice too, singing in Big Kick, Plain Scrap. And Matt referenced he kind of had a more growly, whispery voice at times. And Cruel to Be Kind doesn't really that's the opening track on the album. It doesn't really give you a sense of what the album as a whole is like. That seems to be the most almost traditional or conventional song in a way, even though I think that is definitely like an earworm or like a catchy single to have. I think that's the only one that cracked the American charts also. But yeah, it made me curious about his other music, and also not knowing him, what legacy he had. I did not know anything going into this album as to what it was going to sound like, so I was surprised on that front. But yeah, like you said, Matt, I noticed some country twang as well in different songs like Born Fighter, and yeah, it was like above average for me, not great, but definitely enjoyable. So that was kind of my main takeaway.
Well, yeah, I know a couple things about Nick Lowe that might inform some of it. One was that he was married to Johnny Cash and June Carter's daughter, which I think right around this time,
Roseanne?
which probably
For a second
explains...
there, I thought you were saying he was married to Johnny Cash. I was like, wow.
No.
I definitely didn't know that. Okay. Yeah.
No, he married Johnny Cash and June Carter's daughter, Carlene. Okay. I didn't know what her name was, so I looked it up. But yeah, I knew that. I also know that he was a producer, Nick Lowe, and that he wrote the song What's So Funny About Peace, Love, and Understanding, which
Elvis
is
Costello.
probably my favorite Elvis Costello. And that, to me, is sort of a good comparison for him, because the Tom Petty album, it's interesting we listened to it this week, because there are elements of sort of the pop elements, the catchiness, right, of the songs that Tom Petty has. And there are elements of the Elvis Costello slice of life, off the beaten path relationship songs that are to some degree relational, that I think Josh touched on there. Now, he is more sex obsessed than Elvis Costello is. But it reminded me of that 10cc album a little bit too, lyrically, content-wise, Josh, in kind of the lane that he was carving out. I think the other thing, if we go with the what does it remind me of, there's a lot of singer-songwriters from the 90s, like the early 90s, that I felt this sounded like too. This sound, you could have easily... This is like the Lemonheads or Jimmy Eat World or groups like, there's a lot of those like pop artists, right? That were doing, even there's you could draw a line to people like Jason Mraz and stuff later that write songs sort of similar to this, like boppy type songs, I guess, to use a more modern context there. I enjoyed this album. Like you guys have said, I don't know if it transcends the genre where you say, ooh, these are like the big star albums where you're like, this is like really solid power pop. Yeah. Cruel to Be Kind probably is in that lane. I think that's a really, I've always loved that song. That's kind of why I sought this out. As I said before, it's a really catchy song. It's also the type of song, the more you hear it, the more you like it, I think. And it's one of the few songs that I could play like 3 times in a row and still enjoy it the third time I listen to it, which is a rarity for me. But the rest of the songs, I like the genre shifted a little bit. I like the eccentric nature of his lyrics at times, mixed with the standard power pop sound. George Harrison's another good comparison, Matt, that you made right there for those that may be listening and trying to get an idea of what it sounds like. But there were also the country songs sounded a little bit like that alt country. I'm going to say this.
Flying Burrito Brothers kind of like...
the Flying Burrito Brothers, the Graham Parsons sound is a little bit of what those songs sounded like. There even was a little bit, and Matt's going to maybe be angry at me for this, but there was even a little bit of like Wilco, Jeff Tweedy, in those country songs. I heard a little bit, for me at least. And so I appreciate the fact that it wasn't just 12 power pop songs in a row. Is it essential, this album? No. But is it the type of album that I would be hard-pressed to think that anybody would dislike? It's not too lightweight to turn people off, right? That might not love pop music. But it's not so heavy that will chase people off either. I think this is one of the few albums I can say that if you played this to 100 people across all genres, I think it's one of the few albums that would get almost no true thumbs down. which there's an art to that, right? To be in that lane.
It's got a high floor, John.
It's got a high floor, Matt. That's a perfect way to put it. I wouldn't say it has a low ceiling, but I also don't know if there's people that would be going around saying this is one of their top 10 favorite albums either. So
right.
I think that might describe the lane it's in. But yeah, I enjoyed it. And it was a nice, with a lot of the albums we listened to this week and challenging nature of the sonic structure, it was sort of jarring to get a Tom Petty album and a Nick Lowe album, which brought a very traditional songwriting, hooky chorus approach to songwriting. So from that end of things, I did enjoy it.
Yeah, there's times in here where he actually sounds like George Harrison, I thought, like especially in Cruel to Be Kind. Like I don't know if there's an intentional trying to throw his voice in that direction or not, but it definitely stood out to me right away. And it's just funny. It's one of those things like, oh, I know this song. And I'm like, I've known this song forever, but I've never cared or thought to wonder or look up who it is. And so there I go.
And it's been covered so much too. I know of a cover probably more than the original, but
and it's clearly his highest. I mean, there's over 17 million listens to that song, and the next highest one is 1,191,000. That's cracking up, and the rest are like in the hundreds of thousands. So it's by far his probably biggest hit.
Yeah, it's a good deep cut album because we've listened to so many kind of things that he's playing on. So if you're looking for something maybe like off the beaten path in a way, this would probably be a good album to listen to.
It also, at the time and now, is universally well regarded. I mean, it's pretty much 8 out of 10s across the board, 4.5 stars for places that use star ratings across the board.
Yeah.
And it's liked as much by Spin and Rolling Stone, The Village Voice, as it is Pitchfork, AV Club, all of it.
Yep.
So that does speak to that high floor, doesn't it?
Yep.
Yeah,
for sure.
Something for everyone.
Yeah.
Except rap. There's not really rap on here, but
there is not rap on here. Polka. There's no polka on the album either. But so yeah. So yeah, I would give this a thumbs up. I don't know if it will show up in the top third of albums in the decade, but there's no shame in that with how many incredible albums we've listened to.
Fair enough.